Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. Today's episode is sponsored by my 3D printing website. Visit dangly3d.com, where we just released the new Easter cookie dragons and the new peacock dragons with wings. They're so cute. Check them out for yourself at dangly3d.com. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Sidgewit, Efficient Reporting. I used to work at a large telecommunications company. Above me was my manager Albert, above him manager Barry, above him senior manager Colette, not their real names. My job was to provide management reporting, which I did largely through Excel, with some fairly fancy graphs, some macros, and an array of formulas, including some array formulas. Colette was a young, ambitious manager who knew how to network, say the right things to the right people, and sound confident whether or not she had any clue about whatever she was managing. Consequently, she'd been over-promoted, Peter Principal style, to a role she struggled with. But due to her nature, she continued to act as if she was in control, and wanted to show her excellent management. One of her traits, which I'd witnessed on rare occasions where I, as the data expert in my area, had been invited into a meeting with her to help explain some data issues, was that her reaction to hearing problems was to decide on the spot she needed something to be done, and that she needed to be kept informed of progress on a weekly basis. This might make sense for a serious issue, but not for a minor issue, which she should have just trusted lower-level staff to deal with. Barry was an experienced, ambitious middle manager who wanted promotion to senior management. In his view, and he was probably correct, the way to his goal of promotion was to tell Colette everything she wanted to hear. If Colette had a target to reach 1,000 widgets, Barry would tell her we'd made 1,000 widgets, whether or not we had. Albert had worked at the company for 25 years. He was good at his job, but past caring about fighting to do a good job, and just wanted an easy time as he eyed up retirement. If Barry asked him for something daft, he'd say it was daft, but if Barry still wanted it, then he'd instantly capitulate. And at the bottom of the chain, I actually made the reports they wanted. They had no idea how I do this. It's an era where managers in their 40s and 50s grew up without computers and can barely sum a few numbers in Excel without help. They think all the pretty graphs and macros and calculated cells are bona fide magic and have no comprehension of whether a task takes 10 minutes or 10 hours, whether it's manual or automatic. I hated it whenever they had a meeting and Colette would require a new report on something as a knee-jerk reaction. I knew that 90% of the time, by the end of the week, she'd forgotten she'd asked for it, and if the problem wasn't that bad, she'd never even look at them unless it was raised afresh in a new meeting. This particular year, I was extra busy. We'd had redundancies due to the global financial crisis, so I was doing about 2 roles at once. Albert tells me that Barry told him that in their manager's meeting, Colette said she needed a new report run weekly that shows which the top 3 colors of widgets are. I explained to Albert the colors are irrelevant, it's just whatever color comes from the supplier, and they're buried in the ground, so no one sees them anyway. So Colette can't possibly need to care about that at a senior level. Albert agrees, says he's already explained that to Barry, but Barry said that Colette wanted it, so we have to make it anyway. So I make the report. It takes about 40 minutes to run each week because it's a slightly fiddly manual copy and paste from a system we have no budget to automate and export. I put it in the shared folder where Colette can access it and send an email to all 3 of them with a link to the folder. For 8 weeks, I do that, and I hear no mention of it from anyone. I suspect no one is looking at it because Colette probably forgot she asked for it 10 minutes after the meeting in which she asked for it. I explained to Albert I don't have time to keep making these when no one is looking at them anyway. I have other more important things, and they'll be late or low quality if I waste time on this. I have too much on, so can I stop making this report? No, because Barry doesn't want to stop making something Colette asked for. You need to keep making the report. Even though it's not useful anyway, they're probably not even looking at it. Yes, you have to keep making the file weekly. In the folder so far, widget color report week 1.xls, widget color report week 2.xls, widget color report week 3.xls, widget color report week 4.xls, widget color report week 5.xls, widget color report week 6.xls, widget color report week 7.xls, widget color report week 8.xls. What a productive 5 hours spent making all those, I think. 8 files full of pretty graphs that no one will look at. Might as well not have anything. Oh, that week I get a blank Excel file. I changed the text to bold, red, font size 18. Right in the middle of the sheet, I write, error with data upload, data link failed, error code 2387AGT. Then I go to save as and save it in the folder, widget color report week 9.xls. I mean, technically, I still made a report, right? Because there it is, right there in the folder. A week goes by, nothing said. I copy file v9, paste it in the same folder, and rename the 9 to a 10. Widget color report week 10.xls. Another blank Excel file just saying, error with data upload, data link failed, error code 2387AGT. After about 5 months of copying that same file, I'm doing my 40-minute report in 4 seconds in what is one of my most efficient pieces of work ever. I finally get Albert to review my workload, and he agrees something needs to stop. In addition to some reports I really do make that really do take time and I get to drop, I casually mention, oh, and there's that weekly widget color report. I know Barry still wants it, but I just realized yesterday that there's some problem with the data upload and it's not been working the last few weeks. They don't seem to have noticed though, so perhaps they're not actually looking at it. Albert believes the line about the fictional data upload as it's all technical wizardry to him, so just agrees and says okay, stop making it, and if Barry asks for it again, we'll have to investigate the problem with this data upload. I'm confident we can fix it if needed, probably just needs a bit of Control-C, Control-V work done on it again. I grin. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called OutrageousAd5290. It says, this was a very creative challenge to the management. Love that you found a much faster way to make the report and prove they weren't even reviewing it. Copy, paste, repeat. Sorry that you had wasted so much valuable time before this solution came to mind. I personally love how at the end of this story, OP got really cocky and actually mentioned Control-C, Control-V work. The boss really must be completely blind to all of the technical wizardry that OP mentioned before if they don't even know what copy and paste is. This story comes to us from 0313. If you insist on being in charge, don't F it up. I worked as a night supervisor in a small private psychiatric hospital years ago. Department directors of individual patient units were on site from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, so there was a bit of overlap in supervisory responsibilities between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. The director of the high security acute care unit did not care for me as a supervisor, nor as a human being. She made it very clear that she was in charge until 5 p.m., not sooner. At every chance encounter, she had some snide accusation or remark to make about night shift, whether real, perceived, or imagined. Nothing I ever did was correct or good enough in her mind. One day, the evening supervisor traded shifts with me so she could attend her granddaughter's school play that afternoon. On that day, I received oncoming report from the nursing director, including ongoing construction progress as the facility upgraded its appearance. About 1 hour into the shift, I had completed oncoming rounds on the second floor and had just arrived on the first floor when a fire alarm sounded. The hospital operator announced a code red on the second floor south wing, opposite and 1 floor removed from the acute care unit. It was later discovered the construction workers accidentally set off the alarm. Nobody was to evacuate their area unless in imminent danger, told to do so by a supervisor, or ordered by a member of the fire department. At night, everybody was in their beds, so all staff had to do was a head count and shut all doors. During daylight hours, patients were walking around the halls, in group therapy sessions, or with individual counselors. I instructed the charge nurse to gather all the patients and staff into a large day room, complete the head count, and remain there until the all clear was announced on the intercom. As I started to leave, the unit director entered and demanded to know why all the patients weren't lined up at the door. Stupid, sleep-deprived me didn't understand this was a rhetorical question. I started to explain that this was the safest way to keep track of this population, and they were in no immediate danger. She didn't wait for an answer. She started yelling for everyone to line up at the back door and leave the building. Just then, 2 firefighters arrived and asked me where the exit was to the outside courtyard. I pointed down the hallway to where the director stood, with 25 confused patients and staff in front of the exit. The lieutenant got about halfway to the exit, stopped and looked at me and asked, "What the heck are all these people doing blocking the fire exit? Who's in charge here?" I walked up to him, pointed at the director and said, "She is." I immediately turned to walk off the unit, listening to the lieutenant loudly telling her they should be in a room with the doors closed, not blocking an exit. We need to get outside, and you put these people directly in our way. The alarm location isn't anywhere near here. You have multiple barriers and firewalls that must be breached before you must leave, etc., etc. At the next all-management meeting, the hospital administrator announced that in the future, directors will stick to managing their individual department issues. Shift supervisors were to remain in charge of global hospital operations, including managing emergency evacuation of patients during fires and other building threats. The director never spoke to me again. Win-win. Jumping down to the comments on this one, we have one from a user called Dur2. It says, "It only takes a life-threatening fire to move some people's ways of thinking. The rules are there to protect the residents, not for your power trip. Trust me, I used to work at a school for the disabled. There is nothing more frustrating than people playing politics when the whole reason for the place existing is for the elderly or disabled. It really gets to me." OP responded and said, "True, I evacuated the same hospital 2 years earlier for a bomb threat at 9 p.m. in the rain. Nobody bothered to come in and help me then. We all got out safely, back inside drenched. A lot of our patients wearing only pajamas or a hospital gown and slippers." Another commenter down below called BookNerd381 said, "I don't know why, but in every place I've ever worked, there are huge issues between the shifts. It's usually better in places where the shifts overlap like yours does. It allows people the time required to humanize the other shift. It blows my mind that you were there working with her for hours a day and she still dehumanized you like that. I'm sorry you dealt with that, but kudos for knowing the proper procedure and for trying to keep those patients safe." Yep, I would have to agree. OP was completely in the right to throw that director under the bus. When it comes to the safety of all the people that you're there for in the first place, I think that matters the most. And the wants and wishes of a director who likes to overstep just don't matter. This story comes to us from Laconic Lacedaemonian. "The best way to kill a bad rule is to follow it to the letter." Policy change. My department, around 200 software engineers, instituted a policy: all code changes must be installed on all servers within 2 weeks or have manager approval. Context: I work in software at large companies. Eventually, software that is written needs to be deployed to a computer somewhere. Software changes are one of the biggest reasons for bugs or outages. But the way many software companies work is every change increments a version number. Think I'm deploying version 111 to a server somewhere, and if the previous version that was deployed was version 101, that means 10 changes are going out. If one of them fails, we basically need to sift through the changes to find the bug and revert the changes. Deploying regularly is good practice and keeps the amount of code being deployed low and allows us to quickly identify failures. Problem: it was literally impossible to follow this rule as simple code changes implied over 100 deployments. If this sounds insane, it is, but only because it wasn't automated. This meant that pretty much any change required manager approval. I called this out and suggested changing the code such that we could make changes to individual systems at a time. 3 months of work. This was not funded by management. The Malicious Compliance. I blocked literally every change because we're not following policy and made them ask for manager approval. This forced managers to confront the unfollowable policy and to understand the complexity of what they were asking. but they kept approving changes anyway. So I kept it up. Every change was going to follow this policy. Then management would be forced to 1. Approve the change anyway, 2. Invest in the code changes to isolate services, or 3. Abandon the policy. While there was an initiative for automation, time to delivery was long and only reduced the number of manual actions to about 30. After 9 months and dozens of overrides, a new initiative that was critical required rapid changes. I made a document outlining how many times the policy had been overridden, what could be done to follow the policy, but ultimately recommended that we either invest now in the changes to allow this to work, slow down the critical project to follow policy, or abandon it. It was abandoned. The aftermath. I received an exemplary performance review with people noting my commitment to quality and a champion of this policy. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called the Fluffiest Redditor. It says, "And still no pipelines to automate code deployments? Sigh." I remember talking with the peeps at Envato back in 2015, I think, who were doing tens of code deployments every day with reliable rollback too. They had a mature process 10 years ago, and I'm still seeing organizations struggling with basic code deployment tools now. OP responded and said, "It's more complicated than that. 1. There were 8 different services to deploy across 14 clusters, hence over 100 buttons to push. 2. Bake time overnight was required as we had heterogeneous workloads throughout the day. Some unique important workloads ran at midnight, and catching it in a staging environment was important. We did automate validation, but scale testing would require us to have a test cluster of comparable scale to production. Instead, we simplified our cluster topology to make all clusters similar so ramping would give us the signal we needed. 3. Services were stateful, and one service had over 50,000 machines to deploy to, which meant that we could only take a portion of the fleet down at a time or risk corruption or data loss. So automation would cycle through and do a few hundred at a time, intelligently picked to avoid loss, and you needed to wait for the machines to come back up. We would have a 3% hardware failure rate per year, and generally during deployments, the simple act of restarting would cause some machines to never come back. Then we need to wait for the system to stabilize when this happens, so it's safe for the next batch. This was all automated but took 4 to 48 hours to roll through a cluster of between 2,000 and 12,000 machines each. The best case happy path would be about 2 days and 8 buttons to fully deploy, one per service with automated progression through our clusters, and would require us to eliminate 2 entirely. Detection of regressions was the primary reason this didn't get fully automated, but we did add CD to our low-pri clusters. Another commenter did ask OP to dumb this down a bit, so OP responded and said, 1. 14 times 8 is the number of distinct units we needed to update code for. 2. Not all customers do the same things. Some important customers do weird things at midnight, and we don't want to break them, so we wait, or bake, until we are confident, and then do the next deploy. If we rushed versus waiting overnight, we would break critical things, versus things that don't matter, because we deploy from the least important to the most important. 3. Each of the units we update have data, state, and stateful as compared to stateless. We might have 3 machines with copies of the data. If we deploy and one of them breaks, data is under-replicated, and the system will ensure it gets back to 3 copies automatically. Does anybody else feel like the job here just wasn't being done properly? If it took 9 months and dozens of overrides, to quote OP, to make any changes to the process? Yep, there's a reason I don't work in tech. It's because I would be overly critical of everything, as you all probably know. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.